Under the chandeliers of the Oval Office, history once again finds its way into the words of an American president. On October 9, 2025, Donald Trump faced the press alongside Finland's President Alexander Stubb and made one of the most consequential declarations of his renewed Middle East peace plan. With cameras rolling and journalists leaning forward, Trump declared with conviction, "No one will be forced to leave." No, quite the opposite. It's a great plan. It's a great peace plan. It's a plan that's been supported by everyone. Like I said, people are dancing in the streets of many, many countries right now. It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. No, we're not looking to do that at all. With that single line, "No one will be forced to leave," President Trump sought to answer one of the thorniest questions in the Gaza peace framework. What happens to the millions of Palestinians still inside the Strip once the ceasefire takes hold? It was a reassurance not only to the people of Gaza, but to a watching Arab world, skeptical of any plan carrying the Trump signature. The moment came as the first phase of the US-brokered Gaza peace deal, jointly endorsed by Israel and Hamas, was formally enacted. Under the agreement's terms, Israeli troops were to begin withdrawing from densely populated areas within a week, while Hamas agreed to a monitored disarmament corridor under Egyptian and Qatari supervision. Trump's insistence that no one would be forced to leave was meant to silence critics who warned that population transfers, even voluntary, could become a political flashpoint. In Washington, the optics were deliberate. Cameras captured the president flanked by the Finnish leader, a symbol of NATO unity, peace diplomacy, and transatlantic coordination. Behind the Oval Office desk, Trump was not just addressing Gaza. He was sending a message to allies in Europe and the Middle East that the United States, under his second term, remains the ultimate broker of order. For weeks, speculation had swirled around the contours of this great peace plan. The document, drafted by US envoy Jared Kushner and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, outlines a multi-stage transition in Gaza, from ceasefire to reconstruction to normalization with Israel's Arab neighbors. It ties billions of dollars in humanitarian aid to verifiable steps: the release of hostages, withdrawal of Israeli units, and joint policing mechanisms under a USEGYPTQATAR framework. Trump's words, "People are dancing in the streets," captured the administration's triumphal mood. In Doha, Cairo, and even parts of Tel Aviv, there were small but symbolic gatherings celebrating what many saw as a rare moment of alignment: the US, Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey backing the same roadmap. Yet behind the smiles lay questions. Would this fragile peace hold? And could the president's promise that no one will be forced to leave survive the politics on the ground? Analysts point out that the statement was more than a moral assurance. It was a legal signal. Under international law, forced displacement in wartime zones has been one of Gaza's most sensitive topics since 1948. Trump's reaffirmation effectively rules out any large-scale relocation of civilians, something Israel's far right had quietly advocated in past months. For Palestinian negotiators, that line became a small but powerful victory, the US president himself rejecting any notion of expulsion. The moment also marked the first direct public reference by Trump to the humanitarian elements embedded in his plan. Behind closed doors, US officials described a Gaza Rebuild Fund, a $50 billion investment pool backed by Gulf states and international partners. The fund's objective: rebuild housing, schools, and hospitals destroyed during the war, while ensuring that no demographic or political engineering takes place under the guise of reconstruction. In diplomatic circles, the Oval Office remark reverberated instantly. European leaders praised it as a reaffirmation of international humanitarian norms, while Israeli ministers cautiously welcomed the clarity it offered. In Gaza, residents tuned in via satellite news, dissecting every word. For many, Trump's statement felt distant, yet symbolically potent, an American promise that, for once, acknowledged their right to remain. Trump's rhetoric also served a domestic purpose. In an election year shadowed by foreign crises, the president wanted to project statesmanship, a leader who could end a decades-long conflict while keeping America's hands clean. By repeating, "No, we're not looking to do that at all," he underscored a contrast with previous administrations accused of backing unilateral Israeli moves. His phrasing suggested continuity, not conquest. Observers note that the Oval Office exchange took place during an otherwise routine bilateral meeting. Yet, as often happens with Trump, the off-script moment became the headline. His guest, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, nodded as Trump expanded on the plan, calling it supported by everyone. While that claim may stretch diplomatic truth, it reflected a rare moment where even regional rivals, including Iran, had signaled cautious support for a structured ceasefire. Outside the White House, reaction was swift. In Ramallah, the Palestinian Authority issued a reserved statement, calling Trump's words a positive gesture if implemented. Meanwhile, Israeli hardliners warned that the commitment not to relocate populations could tie the military's hands in future operations. For humanitarian organizations, the phrase, "no one will be forced to leave," became a rallying cry. UN officials privately told AFP that it aligned with their demands for voluntary return and localized recovery, a principle enshrined in post-conflict rebuilding. In essence, Trump's single sentence redefined the moral architecture of the ceasefire. No expulsions, no demographic manipulation, only reconstruction and coexistence. The optics of the day, American flags draped behind the Resolute desk, the Finnish flag beside them, reinforced the symbolism, a Western alliance standing behind a fragile Middle Eastern peace. Trump, gesturing with his hands, described a vision where Gaza's ruins would give way to what he called a new beginning for everyone. Yet, even as he spoke, challenges loomed. Hamas leaders in Doha were still negotiating final prisoner release lists. Israeli commanders debated security guarantees, and aid convoys lined up at Egypt's Rafah crossing, waiting for clearance. The peace may have been signed, but its enforcement was still uncertain. For historians, the 20-second soundbite will likely stand as the symbolic centerpiece of Trump's second-term diplomacy, echoing his earlier claim during the Abraham Accords era that peace through strength could reshape the Middle East. But this time, the president sought to present strength as restraint. His tone was less boastful, more measured, perhaps aware of the human toll that had preceded this fragile calm. Throughout Washington, aides emphasized that Trump's statement was not spontaneous. It had been scripted into his talking points, a deliberate nod to humanitarian critics who accused his team of prioritizing political optics over civilian safety. It also served to reassure Egypt and Jordan, both wary of refugee spillovers if Gaza's population were pushed outward. In the broader narrative of the Trump peace plan, this declaration marked the moral boundary line. Gaza's people would stay, rebuild, and participate in their own governance under a new joint council backed by Arab partners. The US, for its part, pledged continued funding and monitoring, positioning Washington not just as mediator, but as guarantor. As cameras clicked and correspondents shouted follow-up questions, Trump simply smiled. For him, it was a moment of vindication, proof that the plan, dismissed by many as unrealistic, had reached a tangible phase of acceptance. In his words, "It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it." But beyond the grandeur of the Oval Office, the lives at stake remain grounded in rubble and resilience. In Gaza City, families wait for electricity to return. In Rafah, aid workers sort boxes stamped USAID. Trump's promise that no one will be forced to leave now rests in their hands to be tested not by speeches but by survival. From Washington to Gaza, the message resonates across a fractured region, a ceasefire born of exhaustion, a promise born of politics. If kept, it could redefine how America engages the Middle East in the post-war era. If broken, it risks becoming another footnote in the long archive of unfulfilled peace. As of this October night in 2025, the president's words still hang in the air, both hopeful and haunting. No one will be forced to leave. No, quite the opposite. The